So at age 6, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And yeah, I lived up to that label. My parents said to me I was going to this place. They said to me, you're going to go to this place and they're just going to do a few tests on you. Just don't play up, Hunter. Don't play up. And like, come on guys, you already know a young person being told to not to play up. Of course I'm going to play up. So anyway, we went into this place called Whakatata House. I started fidgeting, I started moving around, I was talking heaps. I was living up to the label of ADHD. Once I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was fed on Ritalin all the way till I was 15. I went through many different medications, Pycnodulol, Clonidine, so many different things. My parents put me in a Woman's Day and the article was called Taming Hunter. And it was an 8-year-old boy who had just been diagnosed with ADHD and his parents didn't know anything about it, but they'd been listening to the schools, listening to the sports coaches and listening to all these people and just feeding that demon in them saying that he needs the medication, he needs this, he needs that. That in the end they exposed that. Bit of childhood trauma. When I was 10, I actually found my mum committing suicide. 2 suicide attempts. I was staying with my dad and we were at my nana's house. My dad was lying in the bed next to me. I woke up screaming and feeling this feeling of just disconnection from Mother Earth, from my mum. And I said to my dad, I tried to wake him up. When I kept shaking him and waking him up, my dad did wake up, but he didn't believe me at first. Like the boy that cries wolf repeating his curse, he picked me up and we were speeding in first, back to my childhood home where the silence had grown. Now when we passed my house, my dad said, see, she's not there, her car wasn't there, but no, not this inquisitive boy. He knew, I felt that disconnection. I knew my mum was in there. I could feel that disconnection. So I said to my dad, no, mum's there, mum's there. So he just trusted that and believed me and he pulled up. As my dad was opening up that garage door, I remember looking back at the same time. He's going, run! And I'm like running over to the next door neighbour's house to get help. At the same time I looked back and I could see those pipes hooked up to the car. My mum was gassing herself. So when the ambulance got there, pretty much they took mum up to the hospital. And that's when I was standing up at the hospital that the ambulance man came up to us and says, you guys are lucky, you know. If you guys were 2 minutes late, she wouldn't be alive. He picked me up and we were speeding in first back to my childhood home where the silence had grown. But if we were 2 minutes late, well, she would have died all alone. That's why I'm about suicide awareness, because I have a lived experience of what I've experienced. And I know there's so many kids, so many rangatahi that have experienced this and found their mum and their parents. And I want to share my story on the hope that it would inspire people to come forward and share their story. Because later in life, when I tried to take my own life through suicide, which was in psychosis, when I tried to jump off the top of the gondola in Christchurch, I had it all planned. I knew exactly what we were doing, but I didn't jump because there was logic there. So I still found that piece of reality within that psychosis. Like I said, I could have been digging through crevices and got trapped and caught and taken myself into so much dangerous positions because I kept listening to that dark voice. Whatever it would tell me, I'd do it. And I was in Hagley Park and it was the golf course. And I started to kind of get the whole movie stuff happening again. So Space Jam popped into my head and I was like, oh, that's right. Michael Jordan stuck his hand down the golf hole and got sucked down to the underworld. So I thought, oh, that's going to happen to me. So in the end, I put my hand down this one hole and it didn't take me. And I just got really, really angry. And I started to kind of convulse and get kind of, and then I looked up and I seen the moon. And that's when I challenged the moon and I did a haka. Because after I did the haka, I broke down and I kind of went into the ground and I went, hee! And when I went, hee, I pushed into the dirt and I said, this is your time to take me now, because if you don't take me now, I'm going to change this world, and if not, I'm going to do the best I can. And that's when I looked up and said to the moon, what do you want from me? Just show me the pathway and I promise I'll do it, and if I fail, I'll get up and I'll try again. After I challenged the moon and asked for that forgiveness, I had this little boy break out in me and he started to cry and I kind of started to weep and break down on the ground and I said, mummy, and I started to feel like I needed to find my mummy. So I turned up at my mum's and I knocked at the door. Now during this whole journey that day, I'd actually woken up in my house that morning and I just felt like I was a king, and I was like, okay, so I've got to take all these ornaments, and my mum would say the story. I dropped on my knees, I started crying and I pulled this satchel off my shoulder. She thought I'd robbed the house. Funny, dark and real, right? I laid all the ornaments out in front of my mum and I told her I was a king. And she pretty much said to me, you know, do you want some help? And I was kind of like, well, you know, what does help look like? And she says, well, I know, there's this place we can go check out up at the hospital. Would you like to? And I says to her, is that the way out? She goes, if you want it to be. So I think it was 2 weeks later that I stayed within this mental institution. Now, bless them because they let me have my studio there. I put beats on, put the headphones on, and pretty much just get into that dimension. And I just started healing myself through rapping. So in the end, when I got out of there, I continued making music to help people. And that's where the King Cass movement was born. Because I was listening back to it and I was listening to myself, and it kept telling me to help other people. It kept telling me to be there for other people as well, not only yourself. Go and find the people will help you find yourself. Next minute, my mum had the support of NA coming around us, the Narcotics Anonymous Fellowship. And I started to feel a space of belonging. I started to feel identity. Now these are things that I had stripped away from me since I was a little boy. That ADHD label, that was my identity. The day I got given that label was the day I was ADHD. When a child has identity and belonging, that can bring achievement, competence, and generosity. And when I say generosity, that's not about just giving gifts and money, it's about creating a safe space. Because a young person walks in a room with mana. You can't take that mana from a person. You can trample it or you can enhance it. My past and my addiction and my journey through meth has actually put a halt on me actually being able to see some of my children. Because the parents can't see the change. They can't see past the madness that it was. I thought it was okay to take my daughter to other people's places and she'd just hang out there for hours on end while I'd be off dealing drugs, methamphetamine, smoking in other people's houses, thinking it was okay to put my daughter in a room and play with other kids while I was in another room smoking meth. She's 12 now. We talk about it this day, about like that whole journey, and we laugh about it. We crack up about being in the car, driving around following these yellow brick roads and just leaving her in the car while I'd wander off and go and look in mountains and try and find gold, just leave her in the car. Like, you know, she's about age 8. Age 9, wasn't okay for me doing those things, but this is what the drug did. It took me away from my family, but I was still had that piece of logic that wanted to be that best father. And today I've got this beautiful bond with my daughter, and I just keep talking to her. And if you get these thoughts, just come talk to me. And it's okay to have these sorts of thoughts. It's okay not to be okay. And that's what I'm trying to teach her. And she's seen the movement. She didn't actually know too much about the story and stuff until last year. She actually came to my presentation and she was bawling her eyes out and didn't know anything about it. And next minute she's like, "What? You tried to kill yourself, Nana?" And she started to learn about this stuff. So now I'm her idol. She's literally wants to be little Cass, so she wants to be a little rapper as well, and she's already starting to connect with her younger friends by helping them in suicidal tendencies. She's had a few of her friends commit suicide, and she's there for the other friends, and she's learning off me. And I think that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to leave a legacy here for my children, and to see her already doing that is telling me I'm doing something right already. A lot of us are using that drug to push away some stuff that we don't want to deal with. It's a fantasy world, and we're taking ourselves into this fantasy world. And at the start, it may just seem like a bit of fun. You're having a few puffs with your bros, but as soon as you start getting hooked, you start to have to sell it. And when you start to have to sell it, you start to have to meet the bad men. When you meet the bad men, you get a whole past and a whole history come with you. And I'm still living that to this day. The amount of diss tracks that people have done to me in the music industry, that I sell meth to children, that I use charities and organizations to get ahead in my music. These are the sorts of things I've had to hear back and from other artists. And a couple of them are now my fans in denial they were. But the thing is, that's the hardest part of it, is taking that past and it's thrown into my future. But I always knew, because of my tattoo on my arm here, that the past, the present, and the future are the three tanifas of life for me, because you've got to look back to get to the other one. You've got to look at your past to move forward to your future. You need to look at your future to deal with your past. So that for me is something that I take forward in life today, and I acknowledge my past and I bring it forward. I'm vulnerable, I'll cry about my past, I'll share it on social media platforms, because that gives them nothing to pick on me about anymore. Because that's what Eminem did too. He stood up and he just says, I'm a trailer trash piece of shit and I'm out here doing this, and he just kept speaking vulnerable. And that's what people liked about him, sharing who he actually is, where he came from, and what he's about. And that's all I'm doing in my music career, is the same thing, just sharing the trauma, sharing the pain, and sharing the golden nuggets to help other people. Standing by the shore, and I can feel it in my soul. These journeys I've explored, the pain is way too cold. Have I fallen too deep now that I can't get back up? Or am I caught up in a wreck of a ship that's been sunk? Where to go to from here? Is the end near or far? How can I see the light when I'm standing in the dark and making rights from wrongs, to break the fear, to find a brand new path? I'm looking at the rear view and all I see is the past.